But Bob Myers is, I mean, to say that his options seem to be endless is a little bit of, that might even be a conservative statement, because true or false, the vast majority of NBA teams would dismiss their general manager that they liked to hire Bob Myers or install him as some sort of director of basketball operations, even above the general manager that they currently employ and like. Like, Bob is a huge asset in the eyes of every single NBA team.
There are probably 5 teams that would not fire their guy to hire Bob Myers. But the other 24, in a heartbeat.
Yes, he is a huge commodity. We're watching Bob gain an even bigger profile as he moves into, are we going to call it a broadcaster's space, a podcasting space? He is now working with Omaha Productions and doing a podcast about leadership. And what is that an indicator of? I mean, did Bob really dream of hosting a podcast one day? Or was just a big enough pile of money put in front of him where he said, I'll do that? Or is he strategically going about raising his profile by getting his name out there in avenues and in places it normally would not be? I think there's probably a little bit of that going on too. Bob is smart. He is playing checkers, not chess. He's 2 or 3 moves down the board. And he's also always struck me, Ray, as smart enough to know that it's probably time to leave before the getting is good, even from a good situation. I think he understands that.
I think he understands that, but the podcast has nothing to do with it. The podcast is a toy.
Right.
It's
a vehicle.
He doesn't need that visibility because people already know who he is and what he's done. This is literally about whether Joe Lacob wants him back. Because I think he'd like to stay, but he wants to be rewarded commensurate with his deeds. And I think Joe Lacob is starting to have doubts about whether that's something he wants to do. And I don't know whether it's because he looks at Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga and James Weissman and goes, where's the magic? Or whether he thinks that his son is ready to become the head of the front office. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, Myers has done enough and has enough sort of chips on his side of the table that this should have been done by now. And the fact that it isn't, and still isn't even after it was first mentioned 3 months ago, is an indication that Joe Lacob is not sure.
Thinking about it. And I remember when we were talking to Anthony Slater about this a little while ago, we asked him, what do you think? Is this setting up a launching pad for Kirk Lacob to step into that role as the full-time GM, president, basketball ops, whatever title Bob would be walking away from, whatever his daily responsibilities he'd be exiting? Would it be Kirk Lacob who would enter? And Anthony Slater basically, he thought that Kirk was being groomed for an even bigger job.
This is not something that, I've discussed at great length. This is not some deeply sourced conversation I'm about to have, but I would think Kirk Lacob to me profiles as the owner in waiting, not the GM in waiting, the next Joe Lacob. He's got his hands on some of the basketball side, but Kirk Lacob has his hands on a lot of the business side too. So I'm not maybe that's what would, materialize where Kirk would step in if Bob, like you said, for any reasons left. But I would predict no. I would predict that Kirk just remains in a very powerful position in the organization, which he currently has, and, will be the successor to his father whenever that comes.
That was Anthony Slater with us weeks ago, when we were just asking him about the first bit of the, wind that blew this Bob Myers speculation our way. Well, today, Anthony Slater was on the Morning Roast talking about this Bob Myers contract situation, which has become a story not only in The Athletic, but on ESPN.com about, this incredibly successful general manager is sort of in limbo right now with a franchise that has no qualms when it comes to spending for winning formulas. Here's Anthony Slater on the Morning Roast talking about Bob Myers.
So one of the hottest topics in the league, just Bob Myers' future. Obviously, I mean, it's well known that he's on the last, at this point, not even just last season, the last several months of his contract. I believe July 1st it expires. And it's undecided. You know, it's not something where we know for sure if he is or if he isn't coming back. There's clearly, you know, financial aspects of this to figure out, but also Bob Myers, I think, just needs to figure out long term if, you know, this is the franchise he wants to lead. And I think, you know, we talk about so much of the future of the players on this team, and I think the future of one of the biggest figures in the organization is also very unsettled. So like I said, it is when you go to any arena in the league at this point, you know, people want to come up and talk about it.
And look, Bob Myers has had his hand on the wheel of this long enough to know, you know, probably better than anyone, how much tread is really left on the tires of this ride. And not that he's about to crash the car or the Warriors are about to crash, but, you know, running out of gas is very much in their future, this core group. And does Bob Myers want to be in the driver's seat as this car runs out of gas if someone else, say, I don't know, Steve Ballmer, the single richest owner in basketball, is willing to break off a chunk of change to come and get the Clippers their first championship ever, because you're not going to be able to do much more with the Warriors. And if Joe Lacob was worried about paying you X amount of dollars, well, Stevie Ballmer ain't.
No, I think the credibility that the Clippers still struggle to attain would take a huge jump if Steve Ballmer just said, I'll not only give you money and power, I'll give you some equity. Because I think that's the coin of the realm now. Bob Myers is not unaware that Billy Beane got equity a long time ago in the A's. And you could say, you know, well, that's just the A's, but it's equity. It's equity in a business that has only gained in financial structure since he got there. So equity, I think, is the new way you get paid. I think Masai Ujiri in Toronto's got a little equity. And I think that's where you go now if you're a general manager with tenure.
I would almost think that the value of these franchises is too much to make any sort of deal that centers on a piece of equity. I mean, if I were an owner, I wouldn't want to give you a permanent in perpetuity slice of my multi-billion-dollar pie. I'm just going to pay you right damn through my nose right now, and you get all your money in. You know, it's like winning the lottery. Yeah. Instead of getting it over, you know, your lifetime, we're just going to give you an upfront payment.
That may be, and that might be what Lacob wants to do, but unless he can replace Bob Myers with somebody of equal quality, what he's doing is putting money ahead of the product, which he swears he never will do. And if that's the issue here, then Joe Lacob's on the wrong side of his own created history.
Well,
just, you know, even 1%. You don't have to just lavish him with like, here's 10% of the club. I mean, Joe Lacob does not have a ton of personal equity in this. There are other investors in this club who have more of a piece than he does. He just gets to run it. And, you know, everybody's happy because he's helped generate billions for the club. But if Bob Myers says, I really want to be paid more than Leon Rose is in New York, and I want like 1%, that's a cost Joe Lacob can easily swallow unless he has somebody who he can convince, not only himself, but the outside world, is better than Bob Myers. And I don't think he's got that guy, and I don't think he can convince people that he will get that guy.
I'm terrible at math. What's 1% of $8 billion?
80 million. But
sounds like an awful lot for a GM. I'm just going to throw that out
no,
there.
But that's not salary. No, all you do is you get a piece of the profit every year. And the franchise being worth $8 billion is not the same as what they take home every year. I think their revenues last year were like $400 million.
I think that
And
the reason why
1% of that is $4 million.
I think the reason why Billy Beane was offered a piece to stay is because that's the only way to make sure he's not a Boston Red Sox.
Well, that's true. But the question remains: can Joe Lacob do better than Bob Myers?
Well,
and I'm suggesting that he can't.
Anthony Slater on the Morning Roast was suggesting maybe Joe Lacob fancies that he actually could.
I mean, Joe is he's just more than other owners, or at least most other owners, just around the basketball decisions, right? You know, you can see in LA, Steve Ballmer kind of just sits courtside. He's a fan. And, you know, there's a lot that's good to what Joe Lacob does, obviously, particularly from a financial standpoint, from a competitive standpoint, just ambition. It's been very good for the Warriors, but, you know, his basketball opinions carry a lot of weight. And, you know, is that good or not? It's tough to be in my opinion, overly critical of the Warriors over the last decade because of all the success they've had. But, you know, however this era ends and as it transitions over the next decade, Joe Lacob's decision-making power will very much be judged, I think, over the next, half decade.
It's a very interesting time for the Golden State Warriors if this Bob Myers conversation officially becomes a fork in the road.